And welcome on into the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malm here with you, along with Zach Malm. Zach, we are on to the bye weeks. Week 5 is here in the NFL.
Yeah, Brett, and it's crazy to say this season's almost flying by. We're already in week 5 and into the bye weeks, and obviously a lot going on right now, whether that's injuries or just players breaking out right now. So excited to get into it with you.
Yeah, some big news coming out in the NFL today out of Las Vegas, and we will start there. But before then, go check out some of our other episodes. Week to week, we've been doing these previews and some recaps, and obviously giving you guys some good guys to go pick up on waivers, some guys that we think are going to be on waivers the following week. And some of those have panned out in the last couple of weeks. So definitely still some guys that are out there. Go check out those ones to watch. Get us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and definitely give us the thumbs up. Zach, let's start out in Las Vegas. Davante Adams comes out today that he has requested a trade out of Las Vegas. Now, this is a story that's been going on for months. Spanned into the back half of last year. Didn't really come public with it. Then over the offseason, it sounded like it was picking up a bit more steam. Again, there was still no public comment on it. Today it comes out that his camp has officially requested a trade and prefers a move out of Las Vegas. First, before we start talking about potential teams, the impact here of the Raiders without Davante Adams.
Yeah, I mean it's something that we kind of looked at in years past as well, Brett. Nothing really too new here, except for the fact that he officially requested a trade and confirmed that he does want to be elsewhere at this moment in time. So I look at that and say, for the Raiders overall, they're pretty much in a I would say rebuilding kind of phase. This is a team that grabbed Gardner Minshew and said, all right, well, maybe he can teach our young guy and Aiden O'Connell some of the little things. They weren't high enough last year to draft a franchise quarterback. Obviously, all 6 of them going before the Raiders picked at 13. They went with Brock Bowers, and that's looked like it's been a great pick so far. But obviously, they're looking towards the future. This is not a team that plans on really being anywhere close to like a postseason berth or anything like that. Just kind of keep the football team positive, work on the younger players and get them involved. I would say for the Raiders and the Raiders offense as a whole, it's basically a fresh start now. If they end up trading him, it's probably just going to be Jacoby Myers, one of the guys that's getting a lot of work. Brock Bowers, another guy that's getting a lot of work. Plus, they have 2 running backs that they've been relying on to start this season in Alexander Madison and Zamir White. So I think it's those 4 guys that'll really be focused on here. There's another guy in Trey Tucker who more of a deep threat for Gardner Minshew. But in terms of like fantasy, there's only just a couple guys that you would really say, all right, well, I'll have my eye on them and put them in my lineup each and every week. It's kind of a mix around right now. And with Davante maybe not being there, you would say that teams would hone in on those top targets, the Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers. So for Vegas, a lot to unpack. If Davante does get traded, we'll obviously see what a maybe what package they could get for him. But I feel like this is really just a move for the future and in rebuild mode. Vegas is right now.
with having Devontae there in Vegas, like I think, him not being there is definitely going to open up some opportunities for some of the other guys. Jacoby Myers, obviously Alexander Madison's a guy that we were talking about a few weeks ago, had the potential to come in and take over the job for Zamir White. Doesn't really seem like Zamir White, that the coaching staff is too thrilled with him. And so I would say that as far as that goes, I actually give the advantage to Jacoby Myers. We saw him at 10 targets last week. That sort of is going to be the name of the game. That kind of continues for him. And they're going to basically have to keep feeding him. Obviously, it depends on if they can get anyone there behind him, but I don't really see Trey Tucker challenging him for any sort of job. But yeah, I mean, Devontae's age and all of that, I don't know that the package is going to be huge. I don't know that we're going to get some sort of like groundbreaking thing that we've seen some of the quarterbacks traded for, first round picks, whatnot. But yeah, obviously, depending on Devontae's value now, it depends on where he goes. And I think that the more crowded of a place that he goes, obviously the lesser that his value will be. That said, like some of the teams that are early out there, or the Commanders, the Jets, those are teams that have, let's take the Jets, for example. Like there's a ton of weapons on the Jets. Does he instantly become this, wide receiver one? I'm not so sure because they have Garrett Wilson there. Obviously they have Malachi Corley. They have, Mike Williams. Alan Lazard has been playing really well. So it's a little bit more crowded there if Devontae goes there. Then if you put him in Washington right now, where Terry McLaurin's there, but after Terry McLaurin, there hasn't been a guy who's really stood out. It's just kind of a bunch of guys. And so for me, I think that, again, it really depends on where Devontae goes, his value. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's really the end all be all of Devontae's value is based on a crowded room or not. If he is there and in a room where there is a number one guy and then it's Devontae, then it obviously changes his value. But if it's kind of a 1A, 1B, or even if Devontae is the lead guy, the lead receiver, then obviously that will explain his value right now. How old is Devontae? Probably 30 something.
Yeah, he's definitely in his 30s. Let's pop it up here and we'll load up the old internet because that's just how we kind of can do it here.
But even so,
31.
Yeah, so like that explains that he probably has like 3 years maybe. And maybe even that's a bit of a like it's around that range that it's coming towards the end part of his career rather than the beginning. I think when you look at Devontae right now, it looks like all right, he's still in prime football shape. He's been pretty solid for Vegas so far this season, and like I said, the age is not too much of a factor. But in terms of dynasty, you got to know what you're really looking for there. And is it a short-term option for one of these teams that goes out and tries to get him?
Yeah, so definitely the story to watch, and we'll be watching it over the next couple of weeks as we approach closer to the trade deadline. So let's jump right to the next big story here. Near and dear to your heart, Rashee Rice goes down with an injury to his knee. There was a look that it was a potential ACL tear. Patrick Mahomes kind of slid into the back of him. It didn't really look that great. Finishes the day with no catches. And now it seems that he might miss the entire season. Again, they're trying to get second opinion before they actually put it out there what's happening. And so there are some tests that are scheduled. Again, they're keeping it under wraps. They've already ruled him out for week 5, which should be noted. But, the impact, on Rashee Rice's, like, dynasty value, because as a dynasty owner, you have him. And then where do you see the Chiefs actually going from here as far as value-wise?
Yeah, I mean, there's the question of are the Chiefs going to make a trade now if they want to find a guy to replace a Rashee Rice, because although that's kind of really irreplaceable, what Rashee Rice has done for Patrick Mahomes in the last year, I would say, and obviously not really at the beginning of last season, more towards the end. He has become that reliable possession wide receiver that he's going to pepper him with 10 plus targets a game. He's going to catch 7, 8, 9 of them and put up yards and maybe get in the end zone. Like just a reliable number one. And it just stinks for, I would say, overall the fantasy football community, because we're looking at a top 5 wide receiver right now, Brett. And of course injuries happen and everything, but like a top 5 wide receiver that people got great value on and are looking at as maybe their guy for the rest of the season. And all of a sudden he goes down on a play that it was an interception by his own quarterback on that one. And to lead to all of that, it just really stinks for Rashee Rice. Obviously, still waiting to get 100% confirmation. The Chiefs fear that it's an ACL tear, but you look at all of the different ligaments there in his knee. You don't know what stayed in place, and if it's a partial one, whatever it is, they still have to do all those tests. And I think for the Chiefs right now, it's kind of maybe hoping that it's not as long as first intended. Obviously, we still have to wait and see. But I would say for the Chiefs, yeah, they might go look at another guy. They could get Xavier Worthy more involved, but I don't feel like it's really there right now. I think it's more of just, all right, well, Kelsey, it took Pacheco being out. It took their top receiver in Rashee Rice being out. And all of a sudden, Travis Kelsey is still sitting there, Brett, and had a really solid week last week. And all of a sudden just could be back to Travis Kelsey. And nothing really has changed in the end.
Yeah, certainly a number of injuries. And obviously, even before the season started, Hollywood Brown ruled out, and, he's going to miss the entirety of the season. So, yeah, not a good situation. And listen, I think that the Travis Kelsey, window, quote unquote, has shut. And, those panic buys or panic sells, I should say, that were happening over the last couple of weeks, like that's done. That window's done. Kelsey is back being Kelsey. And everybody can kind of breathe a sigh of relief if you spent a really high pick on Travis Kelsey. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that, Worthy will get a small bump, but I don't think it's going to be that much of a bump. I could see the run game starting to, kind of factor in a little bit more here. Kareem Hunt, the big example here. And, we started to see it last week, 14 rushes, 69 yards. And I think that that's the sort of name of the game we'll see continue, a reliable guy that obviously Andy Reid has seen before in his system. I think they're going to really try to rely a lot on Hunt and on Kelsey, with the occasional shot down the field where they kind of catch the defense sleeping. And we've seen that. These guys don't really care about your fantasy football team. It's just how it is. These guys care about winning the Super Bowl, and they've done a pretty good job of backing that up as they go for the three-peat, and they just keep winning games. And so, again, it's not going to be pretty, but at the same time, I think that Patrick Mahomes, who's ranked like quarterback 13 since the start of last season, which is not a starter in a 12-team league, I think that that in itself is just a microcosm of what's happening with the Chiefs. And so, yeah, again, not pretty, but it is what it is. They're going to keep winning games.
Yeah, I mean, it should be interesting to kind of see how the Chiefs deal with it. But yeah, it could be just a Travis Kelsey type year, or it just a whole bunch of guys and everybody gets their share. That could be what the Chiefs go for.
So let's jump right to our next spot here, and Malik Nabers. I think that we take a look at what actually happened prior to the injury. Malik Nabers was a beast. Malik Nabers had 12 catches on 15 targets, 115 yards. They tried to give him a carry also on top of that. Didn't really work. But they've just basically been feeding this guy as much as humanly possible. And against the Dallas Cowboys, he was kind of taking a lot of shots. The guy was just getting absolutely smacked around on the stretch of that game. And it was, they didn't really care. They were going to keep finding him and trying to go to him. Took for him hitting his head on the turf, looked like, for them to finally, pull him out with the concussion. And so now we kind of play the wait and see game on him. Real status, obviously, it's very early in the week. Early reports are that they kind of were very positive about him playing. I would say that Wan'Dale Robinson really did shine through, though, in the last couple weeks as a guy who kind of has to get the ball, especially from the PPR standpoint with the targets. He ended up having 14 targets, 11 catches, 71 yards also. And so, Wan'Dale Robinson certainly a guy that we spoke about at least earlier this season in I think it was my week one to watch. These are just guys that are going to get fed the entire year as Daniel Jones kind of tries to push the ball down the field a little bit more. And, obviously he had a really good start to this season too. I don't think we can discount Daniel Jones. But yeah, as far as Neighbors goes, obviously monitor what happens. There'll be a report, I'm sure, tomorrow after practice as far as his participation, whether he cleared protocol, all that. But yeah, just follow reports throughout the week, and he's expected to play. But again, we don't know with these concussion protocols. We've seen guys over the years think, okay, I'm definitely coming in. Like I think back to last year, Sauce Gardner had to miss a game, and he was like definitely going to play, and then he all of a sudden didn't play. So, we'll see what happens. Seattle is the next matchup, so a little bit of a tougher task here, but as long as they keep throwing him the ball, like Neighbors is going to keep catching them and keep getting points.
Yeah, Brett, and I think the longer week definitely is helping Malik Neighbors right now. Obviously, we don't have any news on it. Only Tuesday, and still waiting for practice tomorrow and the next couple of days. See how much he's involved as he tries to get out of concussion protocol in time. The Giants will probably not really go to try and risk him. If he's not 100% healthy, there's no chance that the Giants are going to just throw him out there. I think when you look at the Giants overall, yeah, it's a process that they're working on in New York right now, sitting at 1-3. So when you look at Neighbors, though, and if he is out, yeah, Wan'Dale Robinson's going to get a lot of targets from Daniel Jones. Darius Slayton's also going to get some targets from Jones to kind of make up from the loss of Neighbors. And I also think they'll get the run game more involved with Devin Singletary. So should be interesting. We'll obviously know more about Neighbors and his stance or his status for this week as they go to Seattle.
All right, so let's jump into our standouts here. Let's start out with Nico Collins, who just, again, another beat here. 12 catches, 151 yards, and a touchdown on 15 targets. Finishes with a sweet 33.1 fantasy points. And Zach, I think that right now it's pretty clear that Nico Collins is certainly a high-end wide receiver one, and just really has been one of these star stories early here in the season.
Yeah, I mean, remember during the preseason when everybody said, oh, well, Stephon Diggs is there now, so he might be the number one, and he's going to take Nico Collins' work and everything. Yeah, look how that turned out. And that's not to say that Diggs isn't getting work, but Nico Collins is CJ Stroud's top guy, and he's going to go to him in the tough situations, especially this past week when unexpectedly they're losing to Jacksonville at home. And yes, he went to Nico Collins right there and then a bunch of times, Brett, and they obviously came back to win that game. So he's the top guy, clear as day, and I think he's a top 5 wide receiver for the rest of the season because from what I've seen, all he wants to do is target Nico Collins. Even if it's a tough matchup, he is going to get his work. And another just great week this week, and he had a big one. It could be a bit of a tougher week coming up. They're taking on Buffalo. We'll get into that a little bit later. But even so, he will still find a way to target Nico Collins. One of the guys that definitely should not be worried about. He's going to put up his points for the rest of the season as long as he stays healthy.
Certainly agree on that. And jumping to our next standout here, it is Derrick Henry, who was just an absolute beast. 24 carries, 199 yards, and a touchdown. Also got 3 catches for 10 yards, scored a touchdown through the air for a sweet 35.9 fantasy PPR points. Zach, in our league, we play a bonus if you can get 100 yards, a bonus at 200 yards, a bonus at 300 yards. He's 1 yard shy, and it was a little bit tough. And he talked about it after the game that he would have hit that 200, becoming like the 3rd player ever to run for 200 yards there. And yeah, it came to the end zone play where he fumbled it. They jump on it, they get the recovery for the touchdown. But he would have gained that extra yard, and that would have been number 200. So, it was a learning lesson for him. And that was sort of what he took away, even though he had this monster of a game. That was the thing he said in the post-game interview, that like he's taking away from the game that he fumbled the goal line, which I love that, just that energy, that spirit. But yeah, just an absolute tank. And we talked about it last week's episode about game script and how that was sort of going to be the dictating of Derrick Henry's game. I didn't think that he was going to rush for 87 yards on the first play from scrimmage. But sure enough, there it was. And that kind of dictated the rest of the game, because it was like, okay, well, now we have to go to him every chance that we kind of can. And so, yeah, there were times where the Bills kind of stacked the box a little bit, put a couple extra guys on the line, rushed on the inside, knowing Henry was coming at him. And they did stop him a couple times for some losses. But, yeah, I think that as far as Derrick Henry's future goes in this offense, like game script, if they are up, dude's a tank. He's going to just keep getting the ball, and they're going to keep feeding him.
Yeah, 100%. And it's going to come down to, who they're playing, how their defense is playing that day, like everything going on. And a Ravens team that's only sitting at 2-2 right now. And I say only, some teams would be begging to sit at 2-2. But the Ravens, who obviously have big expectations towards the end of the year, sitting at 2-2, they're going to go after it. They know that these wins are going to come in handy when it comes towards February or January. And I think when you look at their schedule coming up, at Bengals, home to the Commanders, then at the Buccaneers, then at Cleveland, those 4 games, you would say probably 3 of those, Brett, I would say that they're probably going to be up in those games, just based on how their opponents have been playing. And just in the end, the Ravens being like the better team, I would say that they'll be up in those games. So I look at Derrick Henry and it comes down to game script, but they know that if they give him the ball, he will do anything possible with it. Frank, they gave him the ball in the first play of the game, Brett, and he took it all the way. So against a tough Buffalo front. So even against tough defenses, he could figure his way and get his points. And I think that's a big, like, positive sign for Derrick Henry owners.
Yeah, certainly one that I didn't exactly see coming, just because Buffalo was riding in so hot. I actually had the choice between the defenses because I own Buffalo and Baltimore. Started the wrong defense, and so I'll take the L on that. Ended up winning, so that's okay. But yeah, certainly it was not fun watching Derrick Henry run all over my team. Although it was fun from the other side because I do have him in the league. So jumping to our last standout now. It is Kenneth Walker III. Zach, this guy was probably the most slippery guy of the entire week 4. 12 carries, 80 yards, 3 touchdowns. It looked like he was running forwards, backwards. It was just pretty nuts. To try to get outside, he was almost running backwards. And so still breaking the plane and getting past all these guys. So scores 3 touchdowns, adds 4 catches in the air for 36 yards. Should be noted that Zach Charbonnet also played a bit of a role, catched 5 passes for 39 yards. So it's not like there was any sort of talk. There was a lot of talk that they were going to kind of slow Walker back in, that, Charbonnet wasn't going to have any role. They both really had a role in this game. Kenneth Walker, obviously a trio of touchdowns, though, and kind of just picked up where he left off.
Yeah, Brett, I think the biggest thing coming in was obviously the injury and the abdominal injury that Kenneth Walker was going through into Monday Night Football, and they said, all right, well, yeah, he's good to go. He's good to go. And when you actually watching the game, when you saw the play where he was on top of Alex Anzalone and somehow just mixed his body and shook around and still managed to get yards after it, for somebody that has a core injury, abdominal injury that they're going through, that was probably the best sign you could have seen as a Kenneth Walker owner. If you haven't seen that highlight, definitely go check it out. Crazy stuff how he was able to manage that even with the injury coming in. And the best part about it was, yeah, the goal line. They had a bunch of opportunities on the goal line. DK Metcalf stopped one time. Seattle drove a couple more times. And Kenneth Walker gets 3 touchdowns on just 12 carries, Brett. He didn't get the full workload, but he made up for it with the touchdowns, and he ended up getting some solid plays. Also got some work in the passing game, which sometimes we see that a little bit from Kenneth Walker, but not like this. I mean, four receptions for 36 yards. You usually see Charbonnet come in for a lot of passing downs and everything. I think this is a real positive sign for Kenneth Walker in this next coming weeks, and he ends up taking on the Giants next week, which should be a solid matchup for him. It just tells me that, yeah, Kenneth Walker missed a couple weeks, but he is 100% back, and he is definitely healthy right now.
All right, pretty good segue right into our games coming up this week, and we go to the first game here in our rundown. Thursday Night Football, Atlanta hosting Tampa Bay. Zach, I think we got to start out with Tampa Bay, and it really just comes down to Mike Evans might not be playing in the game. Limited participant in the walkthrough, kind of was battling a bit of a leg injury with the knee, with the calf. They were very unclear about his, the severity of what's actually happening. And so, yeah, he's limited. We'll see what happens. But if he can't go, and I, preface it with that, Chris Godwin becomes like an absolute must start, correct?
Yeah, 100%. And they're going up against an Atlanta defense that last week New Orleans had a fun time against. Olave, Shaheed both got really involved. And I think when you look at this Bucs offense overall, I mean, they focus on the passing game. They're letting Baker really go to work. They let him go to town in the first half against Philadelphia last week. I think if you're a Godwin owner right now, you're very happy with how things have gone. And I think, Brett, anyways, like Chris Godwin is probably a top 10 wide receiver right now, just based on he gets so many targets. He's really been that possession kind of player for Baker Mayfield, and we talk about how important that is in fantasy football, and especially in PPR. He's just racking up receptions, and he'll get the yards involved with it. Once in a while, he'll get the touchdown, and maybe that's the next step for a guy like Chris Godwin. That's more of Evans's thing, is getting into the end zone. But I mean, Chris Godwin is a full go no matter what in this game, but definitely could get an upgrade if he's going and Mike Evans can't. I don't think really anybody behind those two guys in the wide receiver room. Yes, Jalen McMillan hasn't practiced, and Trey Palmer looked kind of solid. I think he got a touchdown last week for the Bucs, but I don't see really anybody past Godwin in that receiver room getting too involved. I'd look more towards the running game with Bucky Irving as well as Rachaad White. More so, Bucky Irving will get the carries. But in a game like this, if Tampa is losing, Rachaad White will be in the game. He'll get those checkdowns out of the backfield. Got 7 receptions last week, Brett, in a game that they were winning the entire time. So that's pretty crazy to say in the end. But good stuff from both of those guys, and should be started in basically every league.
Yeah, agree. I agree with you. I think that the Irving versus White thing, like I said, it's inevitable. Like White still ended up factoring in to the game. They didn't exactly need to, rush with him because they were kind of, the game was sort of over. So they kind of go to Bucky Irving and they kind of let him do his thing. But as far as it goes this week, I think, it really comes down to Evan's status. For me, Godwin is a must start no matter what, just because he's sort of rolling right now. But certainly becomes, an interesting case if Evans isn't there. This could be a huge output for him. Baker Mayfield, though, really is shining. And so to me, he's a start right now. Like you can put him in your lineup. I'm comfortable putting him there, especially if you have one of those guys that is a little bit more uncomfortable. Even like a guy like a Patrick Mahomes, he's playing against New Orleans, not scoring a ton of points. That's one that I would actually look at this week, which is interesting to say the least, just looking at the quarterbacks from the outside. But yeah, I think that's sort of the name of the game this week.
Yeah, 100%. And on Atlanta's side, you got to look at the main guys, but Bijan Robinson is limited in practice today. So something just to keep an eye on. Because he's limited today, Tuesday, I don't feel as worried about it. But if it starts to come about just again, I think definitely something to keep an eye on as a Bijan owner. If that's the case and Bijan is out, I mean, Tyler Algier, Brett, becomes a top 15 running back easily. I think you gotta go start him because even we saw last week he out carried Bijan, which was unbelievable. A little bit scary as a Bijan owner. I thought we were done with the Arthur Smith type days, but all of a sudden we're back, and Tyler Algier is getting some work out of the backfield. So I would definitely, if you have not already as a Bijan owner, go get Tyler Algier and make sure just in case. But it looks like for now that Bijan should be good to go. The other two guys are Drake London as well as Darnell Mooney, who I also have on my radar. Again, just because those two guys are always involved. And this is not a bad matchup by any means for the Falcons. I think this is one that those two guys, if they're playing well, I think they can take advantage of Tampa Bay's secondary. Kyle Pitts with the dud last week, Brett, and I think that's just the nature of the tight end position right now. It's kind of like if you have a backup and you feel more confident in that guy, for example, I have Pat Freiermuth, who I drafted as a backup this year, who's been probably one of the most consistent tight ends so far this season. If you're up to a decision like that, then I'd say, all right, take your shot on one. It's just hard right now with tight ends. It's basically a guess right now.
Yeah, I think on my side, it's kind of the same name in the game. You're not playing Kirk Cousins. You're playing Kirk Cousins if you're in a super flex league and nothing more. As far as the running back situation goes, you're right. Like we got to monitor Bijan's status. Bijan is out, then Algier is a must start. I agree with that point completely. And obviously, you're starting Bijan if he is playing, no matter what the status is. Drake London and Darnell Mooney, for me, both are must starts. And I think that, Mooney is more of a flex option, but you're still putting him in your lineup. The upside is too great. There's been a couple games this year where Mooney has outshined Drake London. And you kind of want to obviously have your guy in spots where you can do that. And even without outshining Drake London, Darnell Mooney has been very good all year long. And so he's there too. Kyle Pitts, complete bust. He is officially hit like historical bust status. 3 targets, no catches, obviously no yards. It's not good. This is not a good matchup for him either. Tampa Bay has been pretty good against, the tight ends. And so, yeah, I'm not confident. Like, this is one of those where the reason why I didn't get myself involved in the overhyping Kyle Pitts this year was because we've seen what Kyle Pitts is. And yes, new quarterback, new system, the whole bit didn't really matter to me. I didn't think he was going to be TJ Hawkinson. I know that I'm literally eating my words here because he's going to like go off or something in the next bunch of weeks. But yeah, I just didn't see it. And so here we are, he has his first big goose egg of the year. And yeah, you're starting him if you have him because you did draft him as a high tight end. And we've seen a ton of tight ends this year, obviously dud. If you were lucky enough to grab two tight ends that are at the top, Kyle Pitts being one of them, chances are you're probably already starting the other one, but that'd be my recommendation.
100% agree.
All right, so let's go across the pond as the Jets head to London to take on the Minnesota Vikings. Zach, I think from the Jets side, obviously, we can take the whole Devontae Adams thing outside, and we had that conversation already, so let's get rid of that. For me, it's basically, the sky is falling is the narrative, and I don't really see it that way. Yeah, it was a 10-9 loss to the Broncos of all teams. Breece Hall didn't really look good. They did a really good job of bottling him up. 4 rushing yards on 10 carries. It was a rain game. Like, if you actually looked and saw what the field looked like, that turf, not great. It just wasn't a good game. And, we don't ever really see Aaron Rodgers blame the weather. Obviously, we're talking about a guy who played at Lambeau Field in some of just the coldest, most snowiest games in the history of the league. For him to actually blame the weather was kind of telling there. So, yeah, they did a good job of bottling up Breece Hall. Obviously, like, Garrett Wilson still got 8 targets, didn't really have a good output, 41 yards on just 5 catches. Lazard's just been okay as well, 5 catches. And so I think that, those 2 guys, at least for me, you're starting Garrett, obviously you're starting Breece Hall. Like, I can just preface with that. Allen Lazard still is a flex option for me. I think that he has sort of built this sort of camaraderie with Aaron Rodgers over the years, and that's totally shocking. Like, he's very comfortable throwing it to Allen Lazard whenever he gets a chance. Braylon Allen, still solid, and that's where kind of, teeter on the do you play the running back in that flex spot? And it obviously depends on your team. We're sort of in this buy-mageddon type of deal here with a couple of big teams on buys. And so, yeah, if Braylon Allen is a potential guy that you have on your bench, yeah, I think it's a pretty good streaming option. And yeah, Minnesota is a team where, this could end up being a complete shootout, but it also could end up being a defensive battle, one way or the other. And so it's tough to say how this game will go, but I could see those 4 guys making a big impact.
Yeah, definitely fair. I think I definitely go more towards the receivers in this matchup. I like the matchup versus Minnesota, whose secondary, yes, every part of their defense has looked good, but I think there is a weak spot in their secondary, and they're not at home. It's in London. It kind of changes a little bit from what I've seen in the first 4 weeks. Obviously, those 2 wins at home that they completely shut down 2 good offenses in San Francisco and Houston. That was at home at US Bank Stadium. And I think when they go somewhere else, it changes things just a little bit. But I think their run defense has been very solid, and I think that's going to be consistent. Breece Hall is obviously still there. I'd be just a little more cautious on a guy like Braylon Allen. Definitely still a flex play. You just got to look at the matchup and say, all right, well, is he really going to get going? Or are they going to rely on their pass catchers who, I mean, there's a lot of them. I think when you look at Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard, 2 really solid targets right now for Rodgers. The other guy is Ty Conklin, which, I mean, with the nature of the tight end position, has just become maybe a solid low end tight end 1, high end tight end 2, like that, just based on he gets targets, and we don't see that for plenty of tight ends, and especially with bye weeks this week. Brett, I mean, Sam Laporta is a name that comes to mind. Detroit's on a bye week. That's just a top guy off the top of my head. With that, I think that Ty Conklin should also be on the radar. But on the other side, Brett, I think when you look at how great Sam Darnold has been, I think you then look at this week and say, all right, maybe in one quarterback, I probably stay away and look at another option this week going up against the Jets defense, who have been strong against quarterbacks. I mean, you saw, even though Denver won last week, Bo Nix was nowhere close to 100 yards passing. So a rough day for him. I think when you look at it overall, though, Darnold's been great. He's still probably starting in Superflex, but in a one quarterback, I definitely find another option right now. And other than that, I think for Minnesota, you just got your main guys in Aaron Jones and Justin Jefferson. I'd also put Jordan Addison on the flex radar. However, Jets defense, tough one, tough matchup. And yes, they may get some plays here and there, but it is a tough matchup. So I'd be more pessimistic than optimistic this week.
Yeah, see, and I'm the complete opposite of it. I think that I'm more optimistic as far as Jordan Addison goes. And I really think it's just because I think they are going to try to draw up plays for Jordan Addison to get the ball, using Justin Jefferson as almost that decoy role. They're still going to try to get Jefferson the ball, and you're still going to start him, but obviously you're tempering your expectations. Week, tough matchup. But yeah, I think Addison, for me, like, yeah, he's a flex play, and not putting any higher than that because yes, it's still the Jets defense and it's still a tough matchup. But as far as the game plan, it's pretty easy. What the Jets are going to do is they're going to try to stop Aaron Jones and Justin Jefferson. We'll see if they can do it, but I think that Minnesota kind of knows that. And so that's why I say that I think they're going to try to draw up some plays where Addison over the middle. Jets haven't been good against the slot so far this year, and so that kind of torched them. And I think back to that game against San Francisco where they just got absolutely torched down the middle. And so we'll see what happens. Obviously, we're looking for Michael Carter to play that role, and he's been okay since he started to getting the money and whatnot at the beginning of this year. But as far as those guys go, you're starting Jefferson, you're starting Aaron Jones, obviously. Sam Darnold's a super flex option, but nothing more than that. He's probably a lower super flex option. And then, yeah, I still have Addison on my flex radar.
100%.
All right, so let's jump to the next one. Derrick Henry looks for another 200-yard game, or 199 yards, sorry, against the Cincinnati Bengals Sunday, 1 p.m. Zach, let's quickly start with Baltimore. We talked about them at the top of the show. But do you see them going right back to it and trying to get Derrick Henry going here?
Yeah, probably. I think they're going in a division matchup. They're on the road in this one. Could be a little bit tough for them, but I feel like they'll really lean into Henry here and try and work that out. Zay Flowers is not really being I feel like looked at too much right now by Lamar Jackson, and I think that's something that the Ravens are going to want to try and work on, but you're still going to have to start Zay Flowers. He'll be probably a very low end wide receiver 2 still. I think he'll just get his targets. Last week was a bit of a different game script than I think a lot of people expected in a close conference matchup against Buffalo. They did not expect a blowout. So for Zay Flowers owners, I wouldn't panic just yet. Got to see just a couple more weeks. But at tight end, I want no part of it. Bench him. Bench Mark Andrews. Bench Isaiah Likely. I don't care. They do not even look at Mark Andrews anymore, Brett. And Mark Andrews was going, tight end 3 this year, Brett? It's insane. 9 routes he ran. So, and they tell us that there's nothing going on based on that car accident that happened in preseason that he was involved in. Nothing to do with it. 9 routes. Mark Andrews, who, I mean, for the last 3-4 years, Brett, we've looked at as a top 3 fantasy tight end every single year. It's kind of crazy to me. I think it's also a little bit ridiculous. They have the talent there. They don't even look at them anymore. So it's just crazy, but that's the nature of fantasy football right now.
Yeah, I feel like the two of us bad brothers, and we've advised our sister in our league about trading for Mark Andrews and how great it is, and then he just duds this entire year. Yeah, feeling pretty bad about that one right now. But yeah, it's just crazy. Like the elite days of Mark Andrews, like, are they gone? And again, this is the same conversation that we were just having with Travis Kelce, and like, oh, is it elite gone? Like, yeah, this one might actually be real, and it's sort of just as how the system is kind of coming to be. Um, they haven't really done anything as far as as far as playing 12 formation, having him run routes, and likely ran some routes, and he also didn't get anything. And so, yeah, super interesting, and they're both off the radar for me, like you said. Obviously, you're starting those three guys, though. Lamar, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers. Another guy who I think does have some sort of role, and again, this is more streaming option than anything, is Justice Hill, who looked like he really was a great change of pace back this week. He ended up getting 6 targets this year, and that really was amazing. 78 yards, scored a touchdown. Really was a big problem for them, and so I think that his role will start to expand a little bit. And that's sort of what's honestly killing these tight ends out there, because they're basically running the tight ends out there and throwing the guys like Justice Hill. And so, I'm looking at Justice Hill as a potential streaming option this week in my lineup there.
Yeah, 100%. And we don't see Henry really get too many targets. Obviously, he got the touchdown the other day, which was kind of crazy. Seeing Henry get a receiving touchdown in the end, but he's playing more of that Jerick McKinnon role that we've seen in the past. Antonio Gibson, another guy that comes to mind when he was in Washington. Like, that is very solid for PPR. That's a guy that you want to have on your roster. So if he's available in your league, just stash him. Like, if there comes a week where Derrick Henry is out for some reason, like, that's a very solid option, because he's going to get both work in the run game as well as work in the passing game. So definitely a guy to keep an eye on. But on the other side, Brett, for Cincinnati, I'll just keep it quick. Yeah, it's your main guys with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. The other guy that now all of a sudden is on the radar, and like, in that running back room, it's so confusing, because we were like, oh, okay, Zach Moss is going to be the lead guy. And then Chase Brown just had like the greatest game of his career this past week. So we're like, oh, okay, wait, what? It's all of a sudden Chase Brown again. He's back. All right. Well, I still think Zach Moss is the lead guy, Brett, and I still think he's like an RB2. I really do. I think he's up there just because he's going to get a lot of touches. But like, Chase Brown is on the flex radar, I would say. I don't know exactly like if I'm starting Chase Brown this week. They're playing Baltimore, so it could be a bit tougher. But nonetheless, like, it's hard to tell. I'm still with Zach Moss on this one. I think it was just a Chase Brown. They were playing the Panthers, and they were like, all right, let's give him a good game once in a while.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just been super confusing, to be honest with you. And it's like, is it Moss? Is it Brown? Is it Brown? Is it Moss? And, this week it was both, actually. And so you're not really going to see that often, but, 2 top 20 finishes. Brown finishes in the top 5 of running backs. And so, yeah, I mean, you could be sure you're starting Moss this week, and then, flex radar for Brown. You're starting the 2 receivers. Mike Gesicki, he's still out there in over 50% of leagues. Caught only 1 pass for -9 yards last week as a streaming option. He's still a streaming option for me this week. Listen, you obviously got to temper your expectations. And the play didn't work. He basically caught it behind on a screen pass, decided he was going to try to spin to get around the defense, lost 5 more yards on the play. So not a good decision. But at the same time, like, he's still a streaming option, probably a low end tight end if I had to like put a ranking on him that way. But yeah, it's a streaming option nonetheless. And then Joe Burrow, you're rolling him out there.
I want to know the record for least receiving yards in a game. Like, I know, like, probably like a running back had 2 bad receptions, like, out of the backfield. That makes sense. I want to find out. We're gonna look it up after. Wide receiver and tight end, like the least amount of receiving yards you could possibly have, because -9 is pretty funny. I would say it's only one catch in the end, but you gotta have some work to get -9 receiving yards.
This is why the internet is undefeated. Chris Warren has the fewest receiving yards in a game, -24 yards against Washington on November 19th, 1995. And so there you go. There's your answer.
Thank you,
Pretty
internet.
crazy. The internet remains undefeated. Jumping to our next game here. We head to Jacksonville as they take on Indianapolis. I think that, we got to obviously start with Indy because I think it's the bigger story here. Anthony Richardson goes down again with another injury, and, he's dealing with a hip pointer. They say, he could have came back into the game against Pittsburgh. It just was the name of, okay, the game's sort of done. And so we're not going to put him back in, but finishes with only 5.2 fantasy points. Didn't look that great, honestly. But, it is what it is. The bigger news is Jonathan Taylor. And he has what they're calling a mild high ankle sprain. And I don't know how you can have a high ankle sprain, but also it's a mild high ankle sprain. Doesn't exactly make any sense. You either have a high ankle sprain or you don't. There's no such thing as a mild high ankle sprain. So if he's in the lineup this week, then he doesn't have a high ankle sprain. And if he has a high ankle sprain, he's not going to be in the lineup this week. So let's monitor what happens over the next couple days. But in the case that Jonathan Taylor is not in the lineup, I think Trey Sermon becomes a pretty good option here.
Yeah, definitely fair. I think Trey Sermon has proven that he's the second guy behind Taylor, and depending on Richardson, probably going to play this week. It is what it sounds like. Obviously, it's only Tuesday, so we'll see. But kind of, it sounded like it was a little bit more precautionary as well from Indianapolis last week. They knew he was in pain and kind of said, all right, well, we'll take it a little bit easy. They ended up winning the game anyways against Pittsburgh. So definitely something to keep an eye on. But yeah, you said it. I think when you look at Taylor and if he's playing, like it, obviously he's probably the top running back in fantasy football this week. He's going up against Jacksonville. But yeah, Trey Sermon definitely on the radar just in case Taylor cannot go. I think we were spoiled last week, Brett. And I'm saying this as somebody that traded Michael Pittman like 2 weeks ago. And of course, then he comes out and has a fantastic week. But spoiler, it was with Joe Flacco. And obviously, I was going off when I drafted him, what I saw last year, him and Gardner Minshew, and it looked pretty solid. And maybe they get it involved with Richardson. Although Richardson threw it on the first play of the game to Michael Pittman, I don't know if I trust him just yet. And there's some people that may say, all right, well, I saw enough. I think he's still like a flex option right now. Maybe he comes out big this week against Jacksonville, whose secondary again has been abysmal. So I think when you look at that, it's a good matchup, and it all just depends on if Richardson targets Pittman, and that'll be the story in the end. The other two guys, you got Josh Downs and AD Mitchell. Josh Downs definitely the higher ranked option in my mind. Got some good targets from Flacco last week, but having him back, he's definitely a solid guy who's going to rack up PPR points if he's throwing the ball. So he's a flex option as well, just in a good matchup this week.
Yeah, I agree with all those. Josh Downs is owned in only 15% of leagues. And so definitely was a guy I was considering putting in at ones to watch. He didn't end up being my guy. But I think that as far as it goes with the rest of them, like we're starting all those guys. Jacksonville is another interesting case here. Listen, it's just the sky's falling for these guys, basically. And so it hasn't been a great year for anybody. Brian Thomas has had an okay start to his career, but nothing to write home about. Travis Etienne has been okay. He was solid this week, 11 rushes, 68 yards, caught 4 passes, 17 yards. And so, he finished with a solid line, but it's not the guy that we thought he was going to be coming into this year. And so, you're rolling him out there. He's still like a high-end running back 2, I would say, heading into the week. But, again, we'll see what this matchup brings. Could be pretty high scoring. And so not sure how much the running game actually factors into this more so than the passing game. It ended up working out for Brian Thomas. He had 9 targets last week, 6 catches for 86 yards. And so, he's still a starter. Kirk actually looked very good last week, I would say. 61 yards, a touchdown. He had 12 targets as well. I was happy to actually have him in my lineup. And so, I'll be rolling him out there again. And then, Gabe Davis, staying away from, didn't really do anything. Definitely need to continue to monitor what is happening with Evan Ingram, though. Obviously, everything sort of hinges on him and the targets and all of that. If Evan Ingram is healthy, he's going to still get a healthy dose of targets. They obviously didn't play him out there on Sunday with a hamstring injury. So if he's in there, you're probably starting him. And if he's not in there, then obviously you're not starting him. But you can feel comfortable with those 2 receivers with Etienne in your lineup, even if Evan Ingram is in there, I say.
100% agree on all fronts. Brian Thomas was actually a guy that I was considering for lock of the week this week, just based on it's such a great matchup against Indianapolis. George Pickens went to town on them last week, had a really solid game in the end. And yes, you said it. It all depends on Evan Ingram. If he plays, then obviously he's going to get he's going to get some targets. But I don't think that will really limit too much of Kirk or Thomas. I think they'll be throwing the ball this week.
All right, let's jump right to our next match here. Miami at New England. Zach, let's start out with Miami because I think it's the more interesting case here. Tyler Huntley only had 96 yards passing and then in the loss versus the Tennessee Titans last night. And so didn't look great. They're already the starter this coming week. We have to temper our expectations for everybody, correct?
100%. And that includes a Tyreek Hill. That includes a Jalen Waddle. It even includes a little bit of Devon Achane, but I think he'll kind of get back to normal. It was a horror show yesterday, Brett. It was such an ugly game. It really was. For those watching, you just wanted to turn on the other game, Detroit and Seattle, which definitely lived up to expectations. But how horrible Tennessee against Miami was in the end. I think, you're still starting Achane. He's a top 10 running back. They're playing New England this week, but then you have your wide receivers in Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. I don't know how you actually feel confident starting them. I know it's Tyreek Hill, and a lot of people would just be like, all right, I got to put him out there. I can't bench Tyreek Hill, and then all of a sudden I missed the game where he puts up numbers. I don't know how much I believe that's going to actually happen, but I can't fault you for actually being like, all right, I got to stick with Tyreek Hill. That's just a reality. Some teams are different than others. You may not have a wide receiver that's even close to Tyreek Hill, even in this situation. So, I think Hill is probably the only receiver, pass catcher I'd consider starting. Waddle is off my radar though, Brett.
Yeah, the other side of the ball, it's, obviously you're starting Ramondre. It's just become very weird of what's going on with the receiver room, really. I think that, Pop Douglas looked good, just 2 weeks ago against the Jets. And then it was like, okay, well, here we go. Now they're going to start a corner and, they're going to corner in on Douglas and try to get him going. And then only 3 catches. And so that was a little weird for me to see. Jalen Polk, 7 targets, only caught 3 of them. Not such great quality passes that are going his way. And so, you can't really start any of these guys. Javon Baker. Where is Javon Baker? I don't understand. We saw so much hype around this guy. Seriously, we saw so much hype on this guy and how he was going to be this deep threat. They're not even dressing him. It is just mind-blowing to me that they are not dressing this guy that has garnered so much hype from the Patriots fans and just the Patriots coaching staff. Absolutely nuts. I don't understand it. KJ Osborne held without a catch also. And so, just put Javon Baker in there. He will solve your issues. But so I'm staying away from everybody except for Ramondre.
Yeah, in the end, obviously you, a Javon Baker dynasty owner, not happy right now. Want more opportunities from him. But the fact is, this New England offense is just straight meh. That's just in the end. And I don't think there's really expectations for anybody except for Ramondre Stevenson. So he's an RB2, and that's it. Should be a great matchup. I give a lot of credit to those watching Miami versus New England this weekend. Have fun with that.
Yeah, and just to go back on that game last night, it was like one of those games from a couple years ago where you're like, okay, Thursday night football, here we go. It's like Jets against Jaguars. Teams are god awful, and you're like, okay. And then 3 hours later, you're like, okay, what did I just watch? Like, what was the last 3 hours, and why did I waste my time on like a 6-3 ball game with two quarterbacks who didn't throw for over 150 yards each? Like, that was the kind of game that I felt like we were watching yesterday. It was not good. Obviously, we've now strayed away from that with Thursday night football, and they've started to actually make the matchups very entertaining. But yeah, play Javon Baker. Put May in there. I know New England doesn't want to start rushing their quarterback. They only get one shot at having a first impression of Drake May, but they got to do something because it is just mind-blowing how this receiver room has done diddly squat. All right, so let's go to the next one. Cleveland at Washington. Zach, let's start with Washington. Jayden Daniels looks like an absolute MVP superstar, and I mean, honestly, if the MVP voting was today, I think he'd have a real shot to win it. And I think his supporting cast just around him has been really, really good. Even down to the, Zach Ertz, which we thought Zach Ertz was going to be, sort of written off by Ben Sinnott. Like, Zach Ertz has been pretty good, and he's a good streaming option coming into this week, I would say, as well, even in a tough matchup. You have to sort of temper the expectation for Terry McLaurin, but he's still probably a lower wide receiver 2 for me, so you're starting him. B-Rob looks like an absolute steal in this year's draft. He's a running back 1 for me. Right now, he's a running back 1. Austin Eckler is still battling the concussion, so we'll see what happens. But as long as that workload's there, like B-Rob's going to keep getting fed. This is a fun offense to watch. I'll just be honest.
Yeah, and Brett, and I look at this matchup, and usually I'm like, man, Cleveland, that's a tough defense. And yes, it still is a tough defense, but these guys I feel like are just like matchup proof. And I think I have come to the realization that Jayden Daniels is my every week starter now at quarterback. I kind of went back and forth between him and Kyler the last couple weeks in one of our leagues. It's Jayden Daniels. He's in your lineup. He is a top 3 option at quarterback. Brett, he is Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson and Jayden Daniels, if you have them in fantasy football, of course, we'll include Josh Allen in there as well. But even so, like, these 2 guys have been matchup proof this year, Lamar and Jayden Daniels. So very happy with what you've seen so far, and continue to start Daniels. And even though matchups like Cleveland could get a little tough, I still think he's a very, very top option at quarterback right now. And you said the rest in B-Rob, who's been really, really solid this year. He's trending into RB1 range, Brett, just because of the workload. Like, he's getting so many touches, and I know that they get up in games sometimes, and they'll get your McNichols touchdown with 5 minutes remaining or something stupid like that, and you're like, why isn't B-Rob in the game? He will get his stuff. Got 100 yards this week, which was huge for him. Continue to start him, and McLaurin as well, who he kind of came in the first couple of weeks, and we're like, what is going on with Terry McLaurin? Like, he's the top option, and sure enough, last 2 weeks quieted all of us down, and he's been spectacular. So continue to start him.
On the other side of the ball, listen, I think that it's sort of interesting. You have Deshaun Watson. He didn't look bad last week. He looked awful against a really good front. And so it shows it. Listen, this is reality here. And so, yeah, I think that he's on the Superflex radar, but you're not starting him. It was a tough matchup. Listen, I get it. Vegas is a good front, and so they made him very uncomfortable. And there were times where his line didn't exactly help him, and so he's on the radar for me. Jerome Ford, also, listen, tough matchup, and it was what it was. He was loud, even though he was quiet, and so he's still running back 2 for me. I'm putting him there. Amari Cooper. You still got to obviously play Amari Cooper. And then Jerry Jeudy, I think, actually, quietly putting together a couple good games stretch here where he's almost cemented himself into like that, wide receiver 3 sort of role. So you're putting him in there as well. Let's monitor what's going on with David Njoku and, the ankle injury. And so 3 straight games that he's been out, and we'll see if he makes it 4 or if he takes on Washington this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I think when you look at this offense, there's not very much to truly be like crazy about. But I think just starting the main guys in it, the running back in Ford is definitely getting his touches right now. And I know a lot of people are very hyped up that Nick Chubb is coming back. Hold your horses. He's coming back to practice. He's not coming back to games just yet. Yes, he may come back to games soon, but I mean, that was a big injury, and they are not going to just throw him in all of a sudden because they have a terrible record. Like, I don't think that's going to happen all of a sudden. I would be shocked.
But Zach, he squatted 600 pounds on Instagram.
Yeah, that's the new big thing now. Everybody's squatting some amount of weight, and all of a sudden they come back from a major knee injury. But I look at this week and say, all right, it's a really solid matchup. They're versing the worst secondary in football, in my opinion. I think that Washington secondary has just been terrible. And they may have looked a little bit better last week, their defense overall. But Amari Cooper, fire him up this week. Jerry Jeudy is a guy on the flex radar this week just because they are going to be throwing the ball. I think they're going to be down in this game based on Washington's offense and how well they've been moving. So those guys, Jeudy and as well as Cooper, will be getting their targets and maybe getting in the end zone this week against this secondary. And Njoku, obviously, keep an eye on. Could come back, but may not. May sit out another week. Just keep an eye on it. Tight end is just horrible right now. So hopefully he can change that and be one of those consistent players once he returns.
All right, let's jump to our next matchup here. Buffalo at Houston. Zach, it wasn't a great matchup last week. Obviously, with Baltimore playing the way that they played, they shut down Josh Allen. Josh Allen comes out, says that he kind of felt like, that he was sore. McDermott comes out in his press conference, said the same thing, but said that he should be okay. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens, but I don't think there's much to it. Guy took a big hit. And so, yeah, you're still obviously rolling out there. You're rolling James Cook out there as per usual. Khalil Shakir, we'll see what happens about him because his ankle kind of looked like it got a little tweaked up during that game against Baltimore. And so we'll monitor the status of him. But he's been a real threat this year for them. And he's still out there in like 30% of leagues. And so, grab Khalil Shakir, especially right now when you can kind of stash him and you're not going to have that 30% of leagues go out there because they see that little Q next to his name. And And then I would say Keon Coleman, who's still out there and, over 40% of leagues. Like, go grab him just in case that it does happen. That Khalil Shakir's not going in because, listen, he's caught three targets or 3 balls on 4 targets for 51 yards. And those catches, like some of those catches were like over the shoulder, like acrobatic. He looked good. He did. He looks like what the first round pick that they wanted. And obviously he slipped to the first pick of the second round. But he looks like that first round talent. Dalton Cage obviously won him out as well. Looks great. Looks like Josh Allen's favorite target, like bar none.
Yeah, makes sense in the end. I agree with everything, and just the 4 guys that I have in mind right now for this week is Allen, of course, and Cook, Kincaid, as well as Shakir, as long as he's on the field this week. Obviously dealing with the ankle soreness right now, so he just monitor that. But all of those guys should be in lineups this week.
On the other side of the ball, you're starting all those guys that you usually would start. Joe Mixon, CJ Stroud. Looks like Joe Mixon will be out there, I should say. Obviously, he did miss last week, but sounds like that they were tracking him to come back for this week. Obviously, we'll monitor what happens, but you're rolling Mixon in there, you're rolling Stroud in there. I'd say you roll all 3 receivers out there. It looks like Tank Dell is going to be in there. He's expected to return this week, and so he's probably more on the flex radar for me. But the other 2 guys you're starting, no doubt, Diggs and Collins. And then Dalton Schultz is still out there in 30% of leagues. I think he's a potential streaming option. Buffalo hasn't been amazing over the middle. We've talked about it, I think, every single week on this podcast about how Matt Milano is not there in the middle, and they sort of left the middle open. Some tight ends have had their way. Kind of wish that the Baltimore guys had their way, but didn't, wasn't really meant to be. They kind of just gave it to Derrick Henry. But yeah, I think that it becomes a potential streaming option in Dalton Schultz here.
Yeah, start your guys in Houston. I do think Dell is a bit of a risky one this week. Although he may be back from injury, Buffalo is really good against the slot, where Tank Dell is a lot. So I think it could be a tougher matchup. I'm staying away from him personally in the leagues that I have him this week. Just could be a tough matchup. And Mixon, you said it, he was limited towards the end of the week last week, and they tried to really work on it and made him a little bit of close to a game time decision. They will probably feel more comfortable with a full week of practice if he's back to normal this week. So definitely full go on him. He's a top 10 running back if he plays.
All right, let's jump to the next matchup, Carolina at Chicago. Zach, let's start out with the Bears. DeAndre Swift looks absolutely awesome. 16 rushes for 93 yards, scored a touchdown, 7 receptions on 7 targets for 72 yards. And so he looks like the guy that they went out and they signed as, the first free agent off the board. And so, yeah, he's a must start right now. But as far as the passing game, I think it's a little interesting. Caleb didn't look amazing last week against the Rams, and obviously an easier matchup here with Carolina. And so you can feel a little bit more confident, but probably only to the super flex extent. I don't know that you're actually starting him in a 1 quarterback league, unless, of course, you're sort of in the, hey, my guy's on a bye type of, if you have Jalen Hurts, let's say, Hurts and Caleb, that's kind of the only way I'm really starting Caleb in a 1 quarterback. The receivers are interesting. You're starting DJ Moore, but as far as Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen, I think a little bit riskier right now, just because I'm not seeing Caleb move the ball down the field as well as I like. And obviously leaning in Swift a bit now, as far as that goes. And so I'm tempering my expectations, and it's, tough to obviously say that in what looks like a really, really nice matchup. They're both really on the flex radar, but I don't know that you can say that they're like a lock for your lineup.
No, yeah, I 100% agree. And I think when you look at it in the end, DJ Moore definitely put in your lineup this week. I would say I probably favor a guy like Odunze over Keenan Allen this week. I think Carolina's been pretty good against the slot so far this year, and they've been pretty weak when it comes to the perimeter. So in Chicago, I think DJ Moore and Rome Odunze is more on the flex radar. Yeah, it's still risky though. There could be better options available this week. And you said it, Swift. Finally, it's about time that they really truly got DeAndre Swift involved. And look again, he gets a perfect matchup against one of the worst rushing defenses in football in Carolina. Agree on the Caleb take as well. Just really a bye week kind of situation.
As far as the other side of the field, Andy Dalton, low end, super flex. And obviously it comes down to really, if you're in a super flex, are one of your two guys on a buy? And if so, yeah, sure. Andy Dalton's, I guess, a good option for you as a super flex spot. Chuba Hubbard, you're rolling him in there. I think it's really interesting. We've now hit the 4 weeks and there is just no news at all on Jonathan Brooks. It's just super interesting to me that that's out there. And I don't think they're going to rush him because, Chuba Hubbard is playing so well. Even Miles Sanders is finding ways to contribute to the offense. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit interesting. And, we heard about a week ago, like Brooks was nearing return, but it's kind of just gone all quiet since then. So no news is good news for Chuba Hubbard owners. And then obviously you're rolling Deontay out there. I would say that Legette for me, Xavier Legette, is a good flex option and definitely a guy to go out and grab in your league. He's only owned in 20% of leagues, and it looks like there's a real chance he could be the wide receiver 2 in the offense for the entire year. Obviously, that comes with a grain of salt of whether they go back to Bryce Young in that situation, but certainly an easy guy you can go out and just stash. That's a number 2 option in the offense.
Yeah, 100% agree on Legette. And yeah, you said it. It's Hubbard and Deontay in this one. Should be solid matchups for both of them. And they're both really involved in the offense under Dalton. So should be good weeks.
All right, so let's jump to the next one. Vegas, they head to the Mile High City to take on the Denver Broncos as we hit the 4 o'clock window. It's a little interesting now. Obviously, there's this Dante news that's out there, and we'll see how quickly it comes together, if at all. And it was reported that a lot of teams checked in today on, the availability of Devontae, and that's just kind of how the process started. So not much to read into about that. As far as who's playing in the lineups this week, if Devontae's healthy, like you're putting him there, obviously, but I don't know how healthy he is. That's kind of not really publicized, and we won't really get those reports till tomorrow at the earliest. Jacoby Myers, you're playing him just because the target share is still really good with and without Devontae, so he's still going in there for me. The real question mark for me is where it comes down to with the running back situation. I don't know that I can trust either one of these guys. They're flex options for me. I'd probably put Zamir White, ahead of Madison, even with the low amount of work, but he's still like a very low end running back 2 in a bye week. And so that's not great for his prospects of season long. So yeah, obviously if you have him and, he's like your third guy or whatever, like, yeah, you might have to use him. I'm not feeling amazing about it. You saw what Denver did to the Jets last week and how they were able to just basically bottle up Breece Hall. I can see the same sort of thing happening here again.
Yeah, Brad, I actually really, even though Devontae, he could play, and if he does not play, I think the only guy that I actually have on my radar would be Brock Bowers, and that's it. I think this is one of those weeks where Vegas, yeah, they're coming off a win, they're feeling good, and they beat Cleveland last week at home. They're going to Denver, who's feeling very good right now, better than a lot of teams in the NFL. They're 2-2. They got they're off the back of 2 huge wins on the road, Bucks and Jets, 2 teams that should be in the playoffs. So you look at that and say, all right, well, Denver's feeling really good. Now they're at home, and their defense is on fire. There's nobody getting by their defense right now. Neither Baker Mayfield or Aaron Rodgers had any answers for it or any of their weapons. So I think Brock Bowers is the only one, just the nature of the tight end position right now. You have to start him. But other than that, I'd pretty much avoid everybody else, barring obviously Devontae is not playing this week, which if I'm Devontae, probably not rushing back anytime soon to play football. And he obviously submitted the request earlier that we talked about already. But yeah, I think that's just reality right now for Vegas. They are in a tough matchup against Denver this week, who's feeling really good.
Yeah, it's fair. And yes, obviously you're going to start Brock Bowers. I just think like the entire position has been so depleted this year. And we're kind of just seeing like, listen, Brock Bowers has like an awful game and you're still like, well, tight end 3. And that's kind of how you're rolling them out. And it's just, that's just the nature of what the position this year. And it's kind of funny just based on the fact that everybody was so high on like, you have to go out and grab a tight end early in your draft. And it's sort of is like, okay, well, none of them are really making this high end impact. So yeah, funny how that kind of works. Moving over to the other side of the ball, Courtland Sutton, I think for me right now is the only like quote unquote must start. You're putting Javonte in your lineup. It looked pretty okay against the Jets, and it obviously was a rain game, but it's nothing to write home about him, McLaughlin as well. So for me, they're more so the lower end running back 2 flex options. Courtland Sutton for me is the more attractive option, and it really just comes down to the target share. It just keeps getting a ton of targets, and that has factored into points in the last 2 weeks against Tampa Bay and a really good New York Jets defense. Now it plays against Vegas. We'll see as far as what the pressure that they can get on Bo Nix, but if he does get rid of the ball, it's going to Courtland Sutton.
Yeah, agreed. They're all 3 guys in the end with Javonte, McLaughlin, as well as Sutton are all flex options for me. Definitely guys to keep on the radar, and a solid enough matchup against Vegas. We'll obviously see who's playing on that defense. Obviously, their front's pretty good, and they've worked on that. That's really one of the best parts of this Raiders team.
All right, jumping to the next matchup, Arizona at San Francisco. Zach, let's start with Arizona because usually we start out with San Francisco and say, oh, start your guys. I'm going to say the same thing here for Arizona. Start your guys. You got Kyler, you got James Conner, you got Marvin Harrison Jr., you got Trey McBride. I'm starting all 4 of them.
Yeah, 100%. You got to keep, obviously, an eye on Trey McBride. Probably going to be in practice tomorrow. We'll see. Obviously, it's only Tuesday right now, but obviously coming off that concussion, just keep an eye on it.
On the other side of the ball, the big news that came out this weekend was that Christian McCaffrey is expected back in early November. So that means he's going to miss another month of action, and hopefully you were out there grabbing Jordan Mason because it looks like this dude is just basically the number 1 running back at this point, and he's assumed that role that Christian McCaffrey would have had. Dude just looks like a stud, plain and simple. Top 5 running back option this week. You're starting him, obviously, and then it's kind of just about starting your guys. So Purdy, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, and then I would say that Juwan Jennings obviously came down from earth. I guess came down to earth from the 41 points or whatever it was the week prior. Still finished with a pretty good game, and he had 6 targets, 3 catches, 88 yards, caught one over the middle for long, and so yeah, he's still going to have an impact, but I just think having the other options in that offense is definitely going to temper his expectation. So for me, I'm not playing him this week, but I'm not by any means getting rid of him. I also think he becomes a potential buy low guy in any sort of league because I think he was sort of this one-hit wonder, and so I think you can kind of get him for a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, definitely agree, and pretty simple here with all of these guys. It's a solid matchup. We saw what Washington was able to do to this Arizona defense last week. Every single one of these guys, just put them in your lineup. I think Jennings is the only one that's pretty much I would say like a risky flex play. Just because I actually think that San Francisco is gonna just take it to Arizona and might be up by a lot in this game. And for that reason, they're not going to pass the ball as much. They'll rely on that run game to really close things out. With Deebo Samuel, one of the guys definitely involved in that area of the game.
All right, moving to the next game, and what looks like could be a pretty good game here. Green Bay at the Rams. Zach, let's start out with LA. You're starting Kyren Williams, obviously. Are you starting anybody else in this, Rams team here?
Nope. I don't even think there's really anybody to look at. I mean, you got your Tutu Atwells of the world right now. That's what we're looking at. Who looks like he's probably their top wide receiver. Of course, you put Colby Parkinson on the tight end radar just because there's not many guys that have been playing well at tight end, but really nothing other than that, Brett. I think it's just another Kyren Williams solid week. Like they continue to ride with this guy. I think he's a like top 2 running back. I think you or maybe even like top 3. I would say right now, if you could get any one of like a Jonathan Taylor, a Kyren Williams, and Alvin Kamara right now, like in my mind, those are the top 3. Just because they've just been so consistent, all 3 of them, every single game. It's been anything you would want as a fantasy owner. So Kyren for the rest of the season, or for the foreseeable future, while those wide receivers are out, Kupp and Nacua, just keep putting them in your lineup and ride with them because he's definitely helping you out right now.
On the Green Bay side of the ball, I think that, we talked about, the injury over to Christian Watson and, what the impact might be as far as those secondary guys. For me, I think that, you're starting Jayden Reed, obviously. But behind that, I told you, like Dontavian Wicks for me is right now a false guy for me. I don't know that I'm putting Romeo Doubs in as quickly. I just think the upside for Wicks, hits a little bit higher than Doubs. And so, I'd say Doubs is probably a lower end flex option, a little bit of a higher risk. I think that Wicks has that sort of upside to him. But you're starting Love, you're starting Josh Jacobs, and Tucker Kraft actually has kind of won over this job from Luke Musgrave. And so he's the clear tight end 1 there in that offense, and I think you got to start him every week.
Yeah, I'm just looking at matchup this week, Brett, and this is a great one. The Rams secondary is absolutely, and their defense overall has just been depleted. So I look at it and all of these wide receivers, Jayden Reed, I'd even still continue to put Doubs in, and both Doubs and Wicks on the flex radar, just because the matchup's great this week, and I think they're going to want Jordan Love back and throwing the ball and getting these guys going. So, of course, Josh Jacobs in the lineup as well. Tucker Kraft also in the lineup, and you'll probably get a better week of Jordan Love, who still managed to put up a lot of points in the second half. It was just a little bit too late at that point for the Packers. So he's still going to be a solid option this week, probably a top 5 option based on matchup, and obviously some bye weeks involved.
All right, so we move to our next matchup here, the Giants heading into Seattle. Zach, we talked at the top of the show about Malik Nabers and the potential that he misses this game with a concussion and whether he can get himself through that situation. If he can't go, are you starting anybody else on this Giants team?
Yeah, it's Wan'Dale Robinson is going to get a lot of the targets if Nabers can't go. I think even if Nabers can go, Wan'Dale Robinson is a clear flex play right now because of the targets that he's getting in this offense, really being that second guy. And if teams double Nabers, Daniel Jones will just go to Wan'Dale Robinson. He's perfectly fine with that. I look at last week as the example, and I think they're going to be down in this game as well. Tough matchup. Seattle's feeling good, although they lost yesterday. I still think they're they're going to feel good with that one. And I think the Giants are going to have to throw the ball. Devin Singletary on the running back flex radar. Not a great week last week against Dallas, but Dallas has a good front. Seattle actually also has a solid front, but David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs were able to move on them. So definitely those guys to keep an eye on. Those three are really it. I think Singletary, Robinson, and Neighbors, obviously, if he's playing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, if Neighbors is not playing, it becomes a little bit harder to start anybody outside of Wan'Dale Robinson and Devin Singletary. Listen, we'll see what happens, but there's going to be one of those weeks where Daniel Jones gets forced into my lineup as a super flex, and I'll take my 10 points and go home, and that'll be it. Listen, I think that as far as it goes with Theo Johnson, like we've seen this sort of impact that he can have, but also they haven't really done anything with him yet. And so, we saw the impact in the preseason, I should say, and we haven't really seen it translate here. And so this, Gronk comparison hasn't lived to its day yet. But listen, I think that Wan'Dale Robinson, like we talked about at the top of the show, they're just going to keep feeding him the same way that they're feeding Malik Neighbors. And it's really the separation between the two guys to the defenders is what's doing it here.
Yeah, makes sense in the end. And on the other side for Seattle, I would just start your guys. Obviously our big line. I think Kenneth Walker, obviously now healthy, goes straight back into your lineup. I feel bad for the people that weren't sure on Walker and started somebody else, and all of a sudden Kenneth Walker sitting there with 33 points on your bench. Definitely not a great sign for those people, but I think Zach Charbonnet's still on the flex radar, just because the receptions he could get out of the backfield, plus he just gets a little bit of the workload. I don't know if it's going to be too much. I think they may just ease Walker, or not ease Walker, just give Walker his touches, and maybe just give Charbonnet some of the leftovers, and that's kind of it. I think when you look at the pass catchers, though, this is a beautiful matchup for both DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba, who both had really solid weeks this past week against Detroit. Metcalf especially goes up against Deonte Banks, who has been, let's say, pretty bad so far this season. So Metcalf going to have a good matchup, and I would say the same on the other side or in the slot for Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's been getting a lot of targets so far.
Yeah, I agree on all fronts. Listen, I think Jigba has been a really high impact player for them this year, and really has taken that next step. And so, looking forward to watching him continue. And, like I said, Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet both really having some sort of role in here. Obviously, you're starting Walker as a top 5 option, but Charbonnet is a guy that shouldn't be discounted and certainly should be, added in the 20% of leagues that he's not added in, because he's still going to have a role. And we've seen what happens when Kenneth Walker does not play and the impact that that has on the offense. And so, Charbonnet's still an option for me. And then Geno, the guy that also has looked very good this year and potential streaming option, really, really nice matchup this week for him. And so he's out there, a lot of leagues available, over 60%. And so, definitely a guy that is a good start for this week.
100% agreed.
All right, so Dallas at Pittsburgh is Sunday Night Football. Zach, it sounds like Jaylen Warren is going to end up coming back potentially. What do you think the impact is with him coming back?
More of just split touches. I think even though they relied on Najee Harris a little bit this past week, probably not as much as people would have liked. Classic Arthur Smith brings in Cordarrelle Patterson, and he gets some touches. Then he gets hurt, and then he I forget the other guy's name. I'll look it up. But the another Pittsburgh running back that nobody ever heard of comes in and also eats into Najee Harris's touches. I think when you just look at it, though, it's Najee and Warren. both. I would say Najee's definitely a start in this one, but I think Warren's more of a flex. Obviously, coming back from the injury, could get some touches and make something with what he'll get in his workload this week. Other than that, Fields is definitely a start right now. Brett, I think he just proves that running quarterbacks get their points, and he threw for a ton last week. I think he threw for 300 yards. So he can throw the ball. He proved that last week against Indianapolis. Gets another solid matchup this week against Dallas, whose secondary has not looked great. You saw Wan'Dale Robinson as well as Malik Neighbors go to town on that secondary last week. So should be a good one on their home field. I definitely would start Fields, and I'm also starting both George Pickens as well as Pat Freiermuth, who, Pickens finally got his good week last week and went to town really on that Indy secondary. He's going to get a good matchup this week against Dallas. And Freiermuth is just consistent. You want 6 or more points every week, go to Pat Freiermuth. Like he's one of those guys that has just been reliable, and it's way better than just getting a 0 or getting a dud from one of the guys that you really rely upon as your top tight end.
I agree on all fronts. I think that those are the guys that I would start. On the other side of the ball, it becomes a little bit different, and it really is just matchup based here. Obviously, you're starting CeeDee Lamb, you're starting Jake Ferguson as well, but I'm not sure I'm starting Dak Prescott this week. I think he's probably a low end quarterback 1, if not a high end quarterback 2. Didn't look amazing against the Giants, and divisional game, you could say. And he looked really good against Baltimore. So it's murky, but for me, I think I would look at a potential better option that you have there. Again, tough matchup, Sunday Night Football, the works. So I'm kind of staying away. And then as far as the running game goes, listen, Rico Dowdle got the touches, and it looks like he's going to be the one, but the Cowboys just really don't have a running game at all. And so they're going to kind of look at, the fact that Rico Dowdle scored a touchdown from the air. And so that'll be the thing where people kind of point and say, oh, well, there's the points. But I don't think that the running backs, either one of them really has any impact. So Dowdle for me, low end flex option, but, staying away from Zeke.
Yeah, tough matchup this week for the Cowboys. They're going up against Pittsburgh on the road. I think, it's CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson and probably just Dak Prescott. Yeah, Dowdle's probably the flex play in the end. But Dak, I understand what you're saying. I think some of those guys, you mentioned Geno Smith just a moment ago, like somebody like that, a Baker Mayfield, if he's not rostered, which he probably is with how great he's been playing. Those are definitely a couple of guys to keep an eye on if you don't trust Dak against this strong Pittsburgh defense.
All right, let's jump over to Monday Night Football, Zach, and we'll start out with the Saints as they take on the Kansas City Chiefs. With the Saints, it's kind of just start your guys, and it's kind of just easy to say that, like Kamara and Olave, and I would say Shaheed's probably a flex option, like he's been basically the entire season. You're not starting anybody else though. Like you're not. I know that there's the Taysom Hill argument, blah blah. I'm not starting him. I can't start him. It's just a dice roll every week.
Yeah, he's actually also questionable. So I wouldn't be starting him anyway, even if he was 100% healthy. But yeah, he suffered a rib injury. So he may not even play this week. I know that's just, we're looking at any option right now at tight end, but it's not Taysom Hill. He's not the answer. Somebody else, please. But yeah, you said it. Those 3 guys in Kamara, as well as Olave and Shaheed are the 3 options I'd be starting right now for New Orleans.
And then on the other side of the ball, obviously Kansas City, it's kind of just whatever. You're gonna start your guys. Mahomes, like I said, looking at a potential better option. chances are if you drafted Mahomes, that better option is not on your team, unless you got a really good depth guy. But yeah, you're kind of just playing Mahomes and hoping for some sort of points here as, he sort of navigates this world now with just Worthy as his guy and Kelce. You're starting Travis Kelce, obviously. I got to say that you're definitely starting Worthy, and he to me is a lineup lock this week, probably in your wide receiver 2 range. And then I'm starting Kareem Hunt because I think that Kareem Hunt has the potential to fall into the zone more than any of these guys in the backfield. People say Carson Steele and sort of look at that, but I'm really pointing at Kareem Hunt as the guy that's going to continue on this upward trajectory that he had last week.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to throw a running back in there, it is Kareem Hunt, who was very solid and is going to get the touches. Bit of a tough matchup, New Orleans. Although Saquon Barkley was able to get his work done against them, New Orleans still a tougher defense in the NFL right now. But other than that, yeah, I think Worthy's a flex play, and I think Kelce obviously is in your lineup already. But yeah, Mahomes, you probably are looking to see what your options are. Chances are, though, you're going to have to start him again this week, which it's crazy to say. You're going to have to fall back on starting Patrick Mahomes. Just the nature of fantasy football right now.
Yeah, kind of weird how that sort of works out. All right, that'll do it here for our rundown. Let's head to the final stretch here as we head to our lock of the week. These are guys that are ranked outside the top 20 in consensus rankings that we think you should put in your lineup this week. Right now, I'm leading 2-1 in the standings. Last week, I took Jawan Jennings, 11.8 PPR points, to your Najee Harris, who had 10.3 PPR points. So it's my pick. I'm taking Brandon Ayuk, who's surprisingly outside the top 20. And I'm not really sure totally why. I think it just has to do with the fact that Jordan Mason's playing really well. Listen, Arizona is not that tough of a matchup. This could be one where they win by 40 just because. They've always sort of had the Cardinals number in these last bunch of years. And so, yeah, I think Lucas has his upside, and it was a little bit shocking for me to see him out that high in the rankings.
Yeah, I think he's a little lower than people expected. I think people have a case for it as well. I mean, last week they faced New England, dominated the game. Brandon Ayuk, 6.8 fantasy points in the end. So that could be people maybe expecting the same this week against Arizona, who they expect them to really take care of business, San Fran. But Ayuk can definitely turn out finally, and they throw him the ball and get him his targets. If so, then yes, he's definitely a top 20 fantasy option. I'm going with a matchup-based one here, and it's Amari Cooper, who, although this offense has looked pretty abysmal, Amari Cooper's looked pretty good. Like, he's pretty solid. If there's a bright spot, you say, yeah, all right, Amari Cooper, who had a very long touchdown taken away last week. And I know Cooper owners, I felt bad for them. Really, an 80-plus yard touchdown that he had taken away against Vegas due to some penalties on the offensive line. But this week, he goes up against, I said it before, the worst secondary in football, in my mind, the Washington Commanders. And he's going to maybe get shadowed by Benjamin St-Juste. And I think Amari Cooper is just going to go to town. I think he'll get the targets. He's probably going to get in the end zone and take advantage of this Washington defense like every other wide receiver or top wide receiver has so far in the first 4 weeks of this season.
All right, so heading into our ones to watch, these are guys who we think will end up being a waiver target next week. I also got to take this one last week, and so I'm back here in the lead. Allen Lazard is a guy who I actually went out and picked up on waivers in one of our leagues. He finished with 10.8 PPR points, and I think he's going to continue his way forward. Zach, you picked Roschon Johnson, 7.6 PPR points. And so I'm up and I'm taking Dontavian Wicks, who's owned in only 15% of leagues. Comes to the Christian Watson potential of missing multiple weeks. And this is, again, a guy who has the most upside, I think, of any of those receivers outside of Jaden Reed to become the number 2 guy in this high-powered offense. Obviously, Jordan Love back healthy. I think that's an important thing here. If he were not healthy, I wouldn't be putting him on there, Wicks. But it was a guy we talked about in the offseason as a potential sleeper. And now it's sort of his time to shine because I think the opportunity is going to be here for him. And so that's who I'm taking. And Zach, you actually took a guy that I was actually considering picking there.
Yeah, I'm going with Mike Williams, and mine's more based on the matchup this week. Definitely a guy that I look to take advantage of this Minnesota secondary. And this Jets offense just needs to get back rolling. After last week, they're trying to bounce back, and they're facing a tough team, but not a tough secondary. And I think the Jets can take advantage of that this week. Like I mentioned earlier, Mike Williams will get his touches and he'll get his targets. It may not be a lot, but I think he gets his touches. And for this Jets offense, although Allen Lazard is there and he's getting his touches, he's not necessarily the number 2 just yet. I think there's Garrett Wilson, and they get him his targets. Lazard gets his targets, but I think it's kind of just he makes more of his targets than a guy like Mike Williams right now, and I think that's just the case. I think they both are on the fantasy radar in this offense and what Aaron Rodgers is capable of doing. Obviously, that all changes if Adams comes in, and we'll get to that another time. But for right now, Mike Williams, definitely a one to watch heading into this week against Minnesota.
Yeah, certainly a guy that I had my eye on as well. And it comes down to even more than the matchup, just as far as reliable receivers. And I think that, Rodgers wasn't exactly happy with what he had last week. Kind of has the opportunity right now for a bounce back game, national audience, and obviously international audience as well. I think that there's the potential that, and of course, it should also be noted that he's playing against what was a division rival for so many years. And so it's a game that means a little bit more to him personally. It's not like he's the Chicago Bears, but, I think it's, as far as it goes, a bounce back opportunity for him on an international stage. And so, yeah, it's a good pick there for Mike Williams, a guy who can certainly make his case for a potential big time waiver ad next week.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so that'll do it for this one. Zach, excited to watch week 6, or we watch week 5 and break down week 6 with you next week. Bye weeks obviously are in effect, so make sure you check the lineups and don't leave any of those guys in there that are on the bye weeks. Subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. What's up? Words of Rodgers. The night is darker before the dawn, and we shall rise yet again. Zach Malvin, I'm Brett Malvin. This has been the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Javon Baker, put him in the lineup. New England. Catch you next week.